Rumpole and the Angel of Death by John Mortimer. Read by Leo McKern. Rumpole and the Model Prisoner. Quintus Blake, OBE, and the staff cordially invite Horace Rumpole, Esquire, to a performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare, 15th of September at 7 p.m. sharp. Entry by invitation only. Proof of identity will be required. RSVP, the Governor's Office, Worsfield Prison, Worsfield, Berkshire. I'd been to Worsfield jail regularly over the years. I never thought of going there to explore the magical charm of a wood near Athens. "Hilda," I said, taking a gulp of rapidly cooling coffee, "can you prove your identity?" "Is that meant to be funny, Rumpole?" Hilda was deep in the Daily Telegraph and unamused. "I mean, if you can satisfy the authorities, you're really she who must be my wife. I'll try for another ticket, and we can go to the theatre together." "What's come over you, Rumpole? We haven't been to the theatre together for 3 years. "Then it's about time," I said, "we went to the Dream." "Which Dream?" "The Midsummer Night's one." "Where is it? The Royal Shakespeare?" Not exactly. It's in Her Majesty's Prison, Worsfield, 15th of September, 7 p.m. sharp. Hilda likes to think that those sentenced simply disappear off the face of the earth. "You'll have to go on your own, Rumpole," she said. "I'm sure you'll have lots of friends there, and they'll be delighted to see you." "Plenty of your mates in here, eh, Mr. Rumpole? They'll all be glad to see you, I don't doubt." I thought it remarkable that both she who must be obeyed and the screw who was slowly and carefully going over my body with some form of metal detector should have the same heavy-handed and not particularly diverting sense of humour. "I have come for William Shakespeare," I said, with all the dignity I could muster. "I don't believe he's an inmate here, nor have I ever been called upon to defend him." The screw who escorted me down the blindingly lit passages, with his keys jangling at his hip, told me he'd been a school-teacher, but became a prison warder for the sake of more pay. He led me across a yard. A small crowd of visitors from the outer world stood in front of the chapel. Then the locked doors of the chapel opened, and we were shepherded into the entertainment. I had discovered by a glance at my programme the prisoner playing bottom was actually called Weaver, Bob Weaver. What he was in for I had no idea, but this Weaver seemed to be less of a natural actor than a natural bottom. There was no idea of an actor playing the part. The simple pomposity, the huge self-satisfaction, and the likability of the man were entirely real. We were a segregated audience, divided by the aisle. On one side, like friends of the groom, sat the inmates. On the other side, the friends of the bride were the great and the good. I hadn't realized how handsome Tony Timpson would look without his glasses. His association with an armed robbery had led him to be Oberon, the ruler of a fairy kingdom. His Puck, small, energetic, and Irish, I remembered from a far more serious case, as a junior member of the Clan Malloy. All too soon, for me anyway, he was alone on the stage, smiling a farewell. "I think you'll agree that was a pretty good effort." The Governor was on the stage. "We owe a great deal to those splendid performers, and I suggest we might give a hand to our director." A small middle-aged man with steel-rimmed spectacles rose up from the front row of the inmates and lifted a hand to acknowledge the applause. This the Governor silenced with a brisk mutter of words of command. Now, will all those of you who live in please go out, and those of you who live out please stay in. You will be escorted to the boardroom for drinks and light refreshments. Never went much for Shakespeare when I was at school, Quintus Blake, the governor, told me. Thought the chap a bit long-winded, couldn't make his meaning clear at times. But by God, doesn't he come into his own in the prison service? You mean you use him as a form of punishment? The truth of the matter, Quintus bit bravely into the tepid flannel of his sausage roll, is that none of the fellows on Shakespeare duty have committed a single offence since rehearsals began. Is that really true? And for that I've got to hand it to Gribble. Gribble? Matthew Gribble, inmate in charge of Shakespeare. Just about due for release, as he's got all the remission possible. He produced the play, and even got a performance out of that human bulldozer who played Bully Bottom. Gribble was the man who stood up at the end. It was then I remembered. Matthew Gribble, an English teacher at the Berkshire Polytechnic, who had killed his wife. I think, I said. I defended him once. I know you did, the governor smiled. And he wants you to do the trick again before the Board of Visitors. I said I'd try and arrange it because, as far as I'm concerned, he's an absolutely model prisoner. All this happened at a time when Claude Erskine Brown, who had not yet become a QC, I call them queer customers, took to himself a young lady pupil named Wendy Crump. Miss Crump was a person with high legal qualifications, but no oil painting. She had, I believe, been hand-picked by Claude's wife, the Portia of our chambers, who had not yet got her shapely bottom onto the bench and been elevated to the title of Mrs. Justice Phillida Erskine Brown, a judge of the High Court. Your Miss Crump, I told Claude, seems a bit of an all-round asset. All-round, Rumpole. You said it. Wendy Crump is very all-round indeed. Ha, ha, ha. He gave a mirthless laugh and spoke as a man who might have preferred a slimline pupil. Hope you don't mind, I told him, but I asked her to look up the effect of self-induced drunkenness on crimes of violence. She came up with the answers in a couple of shakes, with reference to all the leading cases. Oh, I'll agree she's a dab hand at the law. Well, isn't that what you need a pupil for? I knew it was a silly question as soon as I'd asked it. What the poor old darling wanted was yet another opportunity to make a complete ass of himself, and those longings were unlikely to be fulfilled by Wendy Crump. I shouldn't be in the least surprised if Miss Crump didn't adore you, Claude. Oh, don't even suggest it. The clever Crump's pupil master gave a shudder. Anyway, don't you get plenty of warmth and affection from Philly? Oh, Philly's been on circuit for weeks. When she's here, she spends all her time criticizing me. How extraordinary! I simulated amazement. I lost his attention as Nick Davenant from King's Walk passed us, followed by his pupil, Jenny Atienza. She was tall, blonde, willowy, and carrying his coffee. Poor old Claude looked sick as a dog. That afternoon I was seated at my desk smoking a small cigar when there was a brisk knock at the door, and Wendy Crump entered and asked if I had a set of Cox's criminal reports. Not in here, I told her. And then, because she looked disappointed not to find those alluring volumes at once, I did my best to cheer her up. Claude thinks you're a wonderful pupil. I exaggerated, of course. It's rare nowadays that you see anyone blush, but Wendy's usually pale cheeks were glowing. I'm the lucky one to be doing my pupillage with Erskine Brown. Everyone I know is green with envy. Everyone she knew, I thought, must be strangely ignorant of life at the Bailey. where prosecution by Claude had come to be regarded as the key to open the jailhouse door. Miss Crump was, I suppose, what would be called considerably overweight, but there was nothing wrong with that. The extraordinary thing is, Matthew Gribble said, that his name is Weaver. He was on the same floor as me, a couple of cell doors away. Of course, in those days he was hardly literate. You say he was. Until I taught him to read, that is. You taught him? Oh, yes. How did you manage it? Oh, I read to him at first, then he began to want to read for himself. So you decided to cast him. If we ever did the dream, he looked absolutely right, a huge mountain of a man with the outlook of a child. And kind, too. He even had the right name for it. You mean to play Nick the Weaver? Exactly. Gribble and I had been in the Worsfield interview room 4 and a bit years before today. Then we'd been talking about his teaching, his production with the Cowshot Drama Group, and of his wife, who apparently hated him, and his amateur theatricals. When she flew at him and tore at his face with her fingernails during one of their nightly quarrels over the washing-up, he'd stabbed her through the heart. I thought I had done the case with my usual brilliance and got the jury to find provocation and reduce the charge to manslaughter. The judge had given him 7 years. With full remission, he'd be out by the end of the month. The incident we have to talk about, I said, happened in the carpenter's shop. Yes, the carpenter's shop, Matthew Gribble sighed. I had a note of the case given to me by the governor. There were only 4 members of the cast working on the scenery and a prison officer in overall charge. His name was Steve Barrington. Do you know, my client's voice was full of wonder, Barrington gave up a job as a teacher to become a screw. Isn't it extraordinary? Oh, do you think he regrets it? He may not have got chisels thrown at him in class with any luck. What was thrown undoubtedly was the tool which Gribble had been using. I put the chisel on the bench. I didn't see who threw it. I only know that I didn't. The problem was that there was a witness who said he'd seen Matthew Gribble throw the chisel. It was Bob Weaver. Rumpole, a terrible thing has happened in Chambers. Ms. Liz Probert sat on the edge of my client's chair. Oh, not the nail brush disappearing again. Rumpole, can't you ever be serious? It depends on whether I want to be helpful. What is it? Claude has committed the unforgivable sin. You mean adultery? Well, that's something of an achievement. Oh, don't be silly, Rumpole. Erskine Brown said to Henry, "Have you seen my fat pupil?" Oh, and he was referring, I merely ask for clarification, to his pupil, Miss Crump. Of course he meant Wendy, yes. And he called her fat. It was an act of supreme chauvinism. But isn't it, I was prepared, as usual, to put forward the argument for the defence, a bit like saying the sky's blue? It's not at all like that. It's judging a woman by her appearance. And isn't the other judging the sky by its appearance? Ah, I suppose I should have known. Miss Probert stood up, all her sorrow turned to anger. There's no crime so contemptible that you won't say a few ill-chosen words in its favour. I'm sure you're busy. I certainly am. We're having a special meeting tonight of the Sisterhood of Radical Lawyers. We aim to blacklist anyone who sends Claude briefs or appears in court with him. Miss Liz, I said, how would you describe me? As a defender of hopeless causes. No, I mean my personal appearance. Well, Rumpole, let's face it, you're fat. You said it. Yes. So, should I get you blackballed in court? Of course not. Why not? Because you're a man. Oh, I see. I shouldn't think you do. I shouldn't think you do for a moment. It was some weeks later that Fred Timpson, undisputed head of the Timpson clan, was charged with receiving a stolen video recorder. The defence was elaborate. While Fred and I were drinking coffee in the Snaresbrook canteen, having left the jury to sort out the complexities of this minor crime, I told him that I'd seen Tony Timpson playing the King of the Fairies. "Oh, no, Mr. Rumpole. No, you're mistaken about that. I can assure you, sir, our Tony is not that way inclined. No, in Midsummer Night's Dream, an entirely heterosexual fairy, married to the Fairy Queen. I don't know if you've heard of one of Tony's fellow prisoners, Bob Weaver. Huge fellow, started off as a boxer." "Ah, battering Bob Weaver." Fred seemed to find the memory amusing. "Pity about battering Bob, though." "You mean the way he went down for the Deptford minicab murder?" "No, not that exactly, no. The way he's deteriorated in the nick." "Deteriorated?" "According as Mavis tells Percy, he has. Can't hold a decent conversation when they visit. It's all about books and that." "I heard he'd learnt to read." "Well, what's the point of that? Of course, it's the other bloke they put it down to. Matthew Gribble. Is that the name? Says he's changed his life and that he worships him, Mr. Rumpole. Mavis says Bob's been worse for the last 3 months, nervous and depressed, like as though he was dreading something." It was then that the tireless Bonnie Bernard came to tell me that the jury were back with a verdict. Fred stood up, gave his jacket a tug, and strolled off, and I was left wondering again why battering Bob Weaver should decide to be the sole witness against a man he had worshipped. I got back to chambers in a reasonably cheerful mood, the jury having decided to give Uncle Fred the generous benefit of a rather small supply of doubt, and there, waiting in my client's chair, was another bundle of trouble, Wendy Crump. "I came to see you about Erskine Brown." Of course, he shouldn't have said it." "You mean he shouldn't have told me about Kate Inglefield?" "Oh, what's he told you about Miss Inglefield?" "Well, Claude told me that Kate Inglefield had decided never to brief him again, and she's taken his VAT fraud away from him. And Christine Dewsbury says she'll never work with him again. And Mr. Ballard, the whited sepulchre who is our head of chambers, he's hinted that Erskine Brown may have to look for other chambers. He's such a wonderful advocate, Rumpole." "Well, now, let's say he's an advocate of sorts." "And he has absolutely no idea why he's being victimized." "Has he not?" "None whatever." "But you know." "No, really, I have no idea." "Will you help me to get him out of trouble, whatever it is?" "Helping people in trouble, Shorter, has been my job for almost half a century." "So, you're with me, Rumpole?" "Yes, of course I am. We fat people should stick together." Naturally, I regretted it the moment I said it. "The governor says you're a model prisoner," I told Gribble. "Yes. Well, that's a kind of tribute. Oh, life's full of surprises. If we can get you out of this little bit of trouble, you should be out of here by the end of the month." "Out? To do what?" He was smiling gently, but I thought quite without amusement as he stared into the future. "Anyway," I tried to cheer him up, "you did a pretty good job with the Midsummer Night's Dream." "Yes, wasn't Bob Weaver marvellous?" "Extraordinary." "Those other cast members in the carpenter shop helping make the scenery, Tony Timpson, the young Malloy, do you think either of them saw who threw the chisel?" "If they did, they're not saying." grassing's a real sin in prison. But your protege, Battling Bob, is prepared to grass on you? Seems like it. Have you talked to him about it? Yes, once. What did he say? I told him to always be truthful. That's the secret of acting. To tell the truth about the character. I told him that. Did you ask him why he said you attacked the screw? Yes, I asked him that. And what did he say? He said, my client gave a small, not particularly happy smile. He said we'd always be friends, wouldn't we? There is no doubt whatever. Here Ballard put on his carefully modulated tone of sorrowful condemnation, that Erskine Brine has erred grievously. Well, which one of the 10 Commandments is it exactly, if I may be so bold as to ask, which forbids us calling your neighbour fat? There is such a thing, Rumpole, as gender awareness. Well, I'm aware of gender, I told Soapy Sam. At least I think I am. You're a man, from what I can remember. That remark would be taken very much amiss, Rumpole, if made to a woman. But it's not made to a woman, it's made to you, Ballard. Are you going to stand for this religious prosecution of the unfortunate Claude? What he said about Wendy Crump was extremely wounding. Nonsense, he wasn't wounded in the least. None of these avenging angels has bothered to tell her what her pupil master said. Did you tell her? Well, no, I didn't, actually. It was because you didn't want to hurt her feelings, did you, Rumpole? Ballard was triumphant. You showed a rare flash of gender awareness, and I congratulate you for it. Although a potential outcast from the gender-aware society, Claude hadn't been entirely deprived of his practice. One of these was a complex and not particularly fascinating fraud on a bookmaker. The prosecution was in the hands of the dashing and handsome Nick Davenant. Claude was being assisted by the able and comfortably furnished, slenderly challenged, Wendy Crump, and I was on my own. Nick Davenant called the alleged victim of our client's fraud. Mr. Allworth, have you ever been in trouble with the police? No, certainly not. The police? No. Claude rose to cross-examine. Before he could open his mouth, however, Wendy was half-standing, pulling at his gown and commanding in a penetrating whisper that he ask Allworth if he'd ever been in trouble with anyone else. Have you been in trouble with anyone else? Claude plunged in. Only with my wife on Derby night. Ask him if he's ever been reported to Tattersall's. The insistent pupil behind Claude gave another helping tug. Have you ever been reported to Tattersall's? He asked. Well, yes. As far as I can remember. Ask him how many times. How many times? Wendy Crump was now Claude's pupil master. I don't know if I can rightly remember. Do your best, Wendy suggested. 10 or a dozen times, perhaps 20. I sat back in gratitude. The chief prosecution witness had been holed below the waterline without me speaking a word, and our co-defendant might well be home and dry. When the lunch adjournment came, I strolled out of court and saw Nick Davenant in close and apparently friendly consultation with the leader of the militant sisterhood, Miss Liz Probert of our chambers. As she noticed my approach, Miss Liz melted away like snow in the sunshine, and being left alone with young Nick, I invited him to join me for a pint of Guinness and a plateful of steak and kidney pud in the pub across the road. I saw you were talking to Liz Probert, I asked him when we were settled at the trough. Ah, great girl, Liz. In your chambers, isn't she? I brought her up, you might say. Did she question your gender awareness? Good heavens, no. I think she knows I'm tremendously gender-aware the whole time. No. She's such a marvellous girl. She does all sorts of little things for me. And you pay her lavishly, of course. I don't pay her a thing. She does it for the sake of friendship. Friendship with you, of course. Friendship with me, yes. I think Liz is really a nice girl, and I don't see anything wrong with her bum. Wrong with what? Her bum. Yes, that's what I thought you said. Do you think there's anything wrong with it, Rumpole? Well, I hadn't really thought about it very much, but I suppose not. I don't know why she has to go through all that performance about it, really. Performance? At Monty's beauty parlour, she told me. In Ken High Street. Takes hours, she told me. While she has to sit there and read Hello magazine. You don't mean that she reads this, whatever publication you mentioned, while changing the shape of her body for the sake of pleasing men? Oh, I suppose, Davenant had to admit reluctantly, it's in a good cause. I saw a chink of daylight at the end of poor old Claude's long black tunnel. I was walking back from Ludgate Circus when I saw, alone and palely loitering, the woman of the match, Wendy Crump. You don't look particularly cheered up, I told her, after your day of triumph. No. As a matter of fact, I feel tremendously depressed. Oh, what about? About Claude. I've been thinking about it so much, and it's made me sad. Someone told you? I was sorry for her. Tell me what? Well, what Claude had said about you that caused all the trouble. Oh, what trouble? Why, Liz Probert and the gender-aware radical lawyers have decided to hound him. Because of what he said to me. They haven't told you? Not a word. But you know what it was. Oh, perhaps. I was playing for time. Oh, then tell me, for God's sake. Well, then, he called you. I don't suppose he meant it. Fat. She looked at me, and in a magical moment the gloom lifted. Of course I'm fat. Fatty Crump. That set me apart from all the other anorexic little darlings at school. That and the fact that I usually got an A+. It was my trademark. Well, I never thought Claude looked at me long enough to notice. I asked her why she was so shaken and wan with care. Because I thought he was a marvellous barrister. Now, I know he can't really do it, can he? All the same, I said, you don't want him totally deprived of briefs, do you? Good heavens, no, I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Then, in the fullness of time, I told her, I may have a little strategy to suggest. At the Temple Station next morning, I bought a copy of Hello. When I arrived in chambers, my first port of call was to the room where Liz Probert carried on her now flourishing practice. I noticed a new scarlet telephone. "Ah, business booming. I'm glad to see you've had to install another telephone." "It's a hotline, Rumpole." "Hot?" I gave it a tentative touch. "For the use of women in chambers only." "It doesn't respond to the touch of a male finger?" "It's so we can report harassment, discrimination, and verbally aggressive male barrister or clerk conduct direct to the SRL office. Sisterhood of Radical Lawyers." "Oh, and what will they do?" "They will record the episode fully. Then we shall meet the victim and decide on action. I thought you decided on action before you met Wendy Crump. Her case was particularly clear. Now she's coming to the meeting of the Sisterhood at 5:30. Oh, yes, she told me about that. I think she's got a lot to say. I'm sure she has. Now, what do you want, Rumpole? Oh, I just came in to ask you a favour. Not self-induced drunkenness as a defence. Crump told me she had to look that up for you. It's not the law. Although I do hear you work for other barristers for nothing, and so deprive their lady pupils of the beginnings of a practice. Is that what you came to complain about? No, I've come to tell you I bought Hello magazine. Why on earth did you do that? I heard you read it during long stretches of intense boredom. I don't have long moments of boredom. Don't you really? Not when you have to sit for hours in Monty's beauty parlour in Ken High Street? I don't know what you're talking about. The protest came faintly. Miss Probert was visibly shaken. It must be awfully uncomfortable, but is it worth it? I mean, all that trouble to change what a bountiful nature gave you for the sake of pleasing men? The question had its effect. No one's mentioned that to the SRL. I thought it might be appropriate if Wendy Crump raised it at your meeting this afternoon. What are you up to, Rumpole? Well, I suppose, looking at the matter from an entirely detached point of view, the rights of one unfortunate male. The case against Erskine Brown has raised strong feelings in the Sisterhood. I'm not sure I can persuade them to drop it. Of course you can persuade them, Liz. I'll do my best. Claude said that pupil, not fat pupil. Well, try it anyway, if you can't think of anything better. And so, with the case of the Sisterhood versus Erskine Brown settled, I was back in the gloomy prison boardroom. Now it was dressed not for a party, but for a trial. Behind the table at the far end of the room sat the three members of the prisoners' board of visitors who were entitled to try Matthew Gribble. The chairwoman centre stage was a certain Lady Bullwood. Beside her sat the Bishop of Worsfield. The third judge was an elderly schoolboy called Major Oxborough. Beside them sat my old friend the Governor, Quintus Blake. The prosecution was in the nervous hands of young Mr. Fraplington. What I didn't like was the grim squadron of screws who lined the walls as though expecting an outbreak of violence, and the fact that my client was brought in handcuffed. Do you wish to address the court, Mr. Rumpole? The clerk, a little ferret of a man, was clearly anxious to make his presence felt. I certainly do. Have you forgotten to read out the charges of mass murder, war crimes, rioting, burning down E-Wing, and inciting to mutiny? Mr. Fraplington, for the prosecution, said helpfully, This prisoner is charged with none of those offences. Then, if he is not, I said, with perhaps overplayed amazement, why is he brought in here shackled? Why is this room lined with prison officers, clearly expecting a dreadful scene of violence? My client, Mr. Gribble, is a gentle academic and student of Shakespeare, and there is no reason for him to attend these proceedings in irons. Your client, as I remember, was found guilty of the manslaughter of his wife. For that, I said, he has almost paid his debt to society. Next week, subject to the dismissal of these unnecessary charges, that debt will be fully and finally settled. And as I'm sure the Governor will tell you, during his time in Worsfield he has been a model prisoner. Quintus did his stuff and whispered to the chairwoman. She found her glasses, yanked them on her nose, and said that in all the circumstances my client's handcuffs might be removed. After that, the proceedings settled down like an ordinary trial in the magistrate's court, except for the fact we were all in jail already. Steve Barrington, the ex-teacher, clumped his way to the witness stand. No, he hadn't seen the chisel thrown. The first he knew about it was when he was struck on the cheek. He took statements from the prisoners, and in particular from B-19 Weaver. What Weaver told him led to the present charges against A-13 Gribble. What Weaver told him, I rose to point out, had better come from Weaver himself. Mr. Barrington, I began my cross-examination, you were a teacher once? Yes, I was. And you gave it up to become a prison officer? I did. Is that because you found teaching too difficult? I wonder if this is a relevant question. Young Fraplington had obviously been told to make his presence felt and interrupt the defence wherever possible. Mr. Fraplington, perhaps you wonder at this question, but wonder on till truth make all things plain. Mr. Rumpole, I'm not exactly sure what you mean. The chairwoman's glasses were pulled off and swung gently. Oh, then you didn't see A Midsummer Night's Dream. You missed a treat, madam. Produced brilliantly by my client and starring prisoner Weaver as Bully Bottom. You enjoyed it, didn't you, Mr. Barrington? I thought they did rather well, yes. And I don't suppose, as a teacher who gave up the struggle, you could have taught a group of hard-boiled villains to play Shakespeare? Mr. Rumpole, I must agree with Mr. Fraplington. How is this in the least relevant to the charge of assault? The bishop came in on the act. Because I think we may find, Bishop, that this isn't a case about assault, it's a case about teaching. Mr. Barrington, you would agree that my client took Weaver and taught him to read, taught him about poetry, and finally taught him to act? To my knowledge, yes, he did. And since this pupillage and his friendship began, Weaver, too, has been a model prisoner? We haven't had any trouble from him lately, no. Whereas before the pupillage, he was a general nuisance. He was a handful, yes, that's fair enough. He's a big man and alarming when out of control. I'd have to agree with you. Good. I'm glad we see eye to eye, Mr. Barrington. So, before Matthew Gribble took him on, so to speak, there'd been several cases of assault. 3 of breaking up furniture, disobeying orders, throwing food, an endless list. He was constantly in trouble, yes. And since he and Gribble became friends, nothing. I believe that's right. So you believe Matthew Gribble's influence on Weaver has been entirely for the good? I said, so far as I know. So far as you know. Well, we'll see if anyone knows better. Now, you questioned the other prisoners, Timpson and Malloy. Yes, I did. And what did they tell you? They said they hadn't seen anything. And did you believe them? Well, no, I didn't altogether believe it. Because prisoners don't grass. Prisoners don't tell tales. Isn't that true, Mr. Barrington? Yes. So Timpson might have seen Malloy do it, or Malloy might have seen Timpson do it, or either of them might have seen Weaver do it. I suppose it's possible, yes. Or Weaver might have seen Timpson or Malloy do it, and blamed it on Gribble to protect them. He wouldn't have done that. There was an agitated whisper from my client, and I stooped to give him an ear. What? He wouldn't have blamed it on me. I know Bob wouldn't do that. Matthew, I whispered sternly, your time to give evidence will come later. Until it does, I'd be much obliged if you'd take a temporary vow of silence. I went back to work. Yes, officer, what was your answer to my question? B-19 Weaver had a particular admiration for A-13 Gribble, sir. I don't think he'd have blamed him. Not just to protect the other two. Bottom the Weaver towered over the small witness table and the screws that stood behind him. Mr. Faplington had no trouble in getting the witness to tell his story. He'd seen A-13 Gribble pick up the chisel and throw it. It struck the prison officer on the cheek. He told the investigating officer exactly what he saw. He felt he had to do it. That was the honest truth. To say that battering Bob was a good witness is an understatement. The first question is, of course, why? Pardon me? Why do you think your friend Matthew threw a chisel at the officer? Oh, perhaps he kind of bottled it up, his resentment against Mr. Barrington. We haven't heard he resented Mr. Barrington. Well, we all did to an extent. All of us actors. Why was that? He put Jimmy Malloy on a charge, so he lost 2 weeks' rehearsal with Puck. I had gone and provided my client with a motive. All right, another why. Yes, sir. Why did you decide to grass against your friend? Well, he taught me everything. He taught me to read, yes. He taught me to like poetry. Then he taught me to act. But Matthew taught me more than that. You have to be truthful, Bob. Those were his words to me. So, when it came to it, I remembered. That's all I've got to say. You've told us Matthew Gribble is the friend who meant most to you. Meant everything to me. And in a week, if he is acquitted of this charge, Matthew Gribble will be free. I don't want to think about it. Did you think he might forget the friend he's made in prison? Things like that do happen, don't they? Oh, yes, Bob Weaver. They happen very often. If a man wants to make a new life, he doesn't care to be reminded of the people he met inside. Did that thought occur to you? I did worry about that, I suppose. Yes, I did worry. Let me suggest where it led you, Bob. It led you to think of the one way you could stop Matthew Gribble leaving you. How was I going to do that? The way to do it was to get him into trouble. Trouble? Serious trouble, so he'd lose his remission. I expect you thought of that some time ago, and you waited for an opportunity. It came, didn't it, in the carpenter's shop? Did it? No one else was looking when you picked up his chisel. No one saw you throw it. Like all successful crime, it was helped by a good deal of luck. Crime? Me? What are you talking about? I've done no crime. I've got to hand it to you, Bob. You did it for the best of motives. You did it to keep a friend. I didn't do it. I swear to God I didn't. Matthew did it, and he's got to stay here. You can't let him go. But that wasn't the end of the story. Why did you do it? The trial, if you could call it a trial, was over. Matthew and I were together for the last time in the interview room. I told you. What have I got outside? Here they all want to be in my plays. I thought of Much Ado next. Won't Bob make a marvellous Dogberry? You've got plenty of time. They knocked 1.5 years off your omission. Yes, a long time together. You were asking me why I threw the chisel. He knew I wasn't asking him that. At the end of battering Bob's evidence, Matthew walked to the witness table, took the oath, and looked at me with patient expectation. Matthew Gribble, we've heard you were a model prisoner. I've never been in trouble here, if that's what you mean. And of all you've done for Bob Weaver. I think it's been a rewarding experience for both of us. And you are due to be released next week. I believe I am. I drew in a deep breath and asked a question to which I felt sure I knew the answer. Matthew, did you ever throw that chisel at Prison Officer Barrington? The answer, when it came, was another punch in the stomach, this time for me. Yes, I did. I threw it. Matthew looked at the visitors and said it as though he were talking about a not very interesting part of the prison routine. I did it because I couldn't forgive him for putting Puck on a charge. After that, the case was over, and Matthew's exit from Worsfield inevitably postponed. You know I wasn't asking you why you threw the chisel, because you didn't throw it. I'm asking you why you said you did. I told you. I've decided to stay on. You knew battering Bob did it, and he blamed you to keep you here because he thought he needed you. Don't you think that's rather an extraordinary tribute to a friendship? There seemed no answer to that. I didn't know whether to curse Matthew Gribble or to praise him. I didn't know if he was the best or the worst client I ever had. I knew I'd lost a case unnecessarily, and that was something I didn't like to happen. At last the gates and the small door in the big one were open. I was out, and I went out. Matthew was in, and he stayed in. Damiens sent a brief in a long case to Claude, and I told him he had a brilliant pupil. I suppose she'll be wanting a place in chambers soon. Claude didn't seem to welcome the idea. So far as I'm concerned, she can have one now. Young Jenny Atienza is apparently not happy with Nick Davenant over in King's Bench Walk. Do you think I might take her on as a pupil? I think I told him that it would be a very bad idea indeed. I'm sure Philly wouldn't like it, and I'd have to start charging for defending you. Rumpole, Claude was thoughtful. Do you know why everyone went off me in that peculiar way? Not really. But Claude had his own solution. It never ceases to amaze me, the poor old darling said, how jealous everyone is of success. 6 months later, I saw a production of Much Ado About Nothing at Worsfield Jail with Bob Weaver as Dogberry. I enjoyed it very much indeed.